So 1 Kings chapter 2 now. David is charging Solomon to keep the commandments, walk in the ways of the Lord. King David dies. Solomon now reigns. So we're going to see this transition of power to Solomon. Adonijah, Joab, and Shimei are put to death, and Abiathar is rejected as high priest. The kingdom is established with Solomon. So there's a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of work that needs to be done to make sure this gets taken care of properly. All right, verse 1. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong therefore, and show thyself a man. And keep charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, and keep his statutes and his commandments, and his judgments and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. So he's basically giving him the admonition that he was given when he was brought in as king, which is also the admonition that Joshua got from Moses and that Moses got from God, basically. Very similar admonitions here. Verse 4, that the Lord may continue his word, which he spake concerning me, saying, if thy children take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, there shall not fail thee, said he, a man on the throne of Israel. Basically saying, okay, look, God has told us if we keep his commandments and do what's right, we will have a king and we will have a kingdom. We will have things established. We're not going to be overrun and destroyed by other people. But that's dependent upon our faithfulness, basically, so we have to be careful with this. Verse 5, moreover, thou knowest also what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two captains of the hosts of Israel, unto Abner, the son of Ner, and unto Amasa, the son of Jether, whom he slew, and shed the blood of war in peace, and put the blood of war upon his girdle that was about his loins, and in his shoes that were on his feet. Now this is referring back to the civil war, when Judah and Israel were fighting each other. We learned about in, I believe that was 2 Samuel that we got into that one. So Joab, remember, he was following the other side, and he was told not to kill Abner and Amasa, but he ended up killing them and eliminating them, basically. So a lot of problems that happened with that, and Joab was not necessarily punished because of that. King David didn't really punish Joab for that at the time. So we want to be careful with this. Now, in fact, who is it? Let's see. This is Keil and Delitzsch in their commentary on the Old Testament made this comment. They said, David ought to have punished these two crimes. But when Abner was murdered, he felt himself too weak to visit a man like Joab with the punishment that he deserved, as he had only just been anointed king. And consequently, he did nothing more than invoke divine retribution upon his head. 2 Samuel 3:29. So that was back when David was just put in shortly after Saul had died, and there was some problems that happened then. And when Amasa was slain, the rebellions of Absalom and Sheba had crippled the power of David too much. That was the civil war that happened. Kind of two civil wars in a way. For him to visit the deed with the punishment that was due. But as king of the nation of God, it was not right for him to allow such crimes to pass unpunished. He therefore transferred the punishment for which he had wanted the requisite power to his son and successor. Basically, let not his gray hair go down into hell in peace. The punishment of so powerful a man as Joab, the commander-in-chief, required great wisdom to avoid occasioning a rebellion in the army which was devoted to him. So there's a bit of a challenge with Joab, because again, Joab's the leader of the army. And in order to lead the army, he has to have the loyalty of the men. And so this is one of the reasons why military coups are not an uncommon challenge against monarchies and other types of government that are more centralized. Because if you think about it, if you're going to fight in battle, you have to be very loyal to your leaders. because you hope your leaders are making the best choice they can in whether you're going to fight and what you're going to do. So you can't have your people questioning you on the battlefield. You need to have that loyalty. You need to have that confidence in each other that when you say, go do this, they're going to go do it. And that when they tell you, if you're one of the army people, when your leader says, go do this, that it's the best thing to do. So that's just how war works. You kind of have to have that loyalty in there. And so to go, to punish Joab and to cause that, that could cause problems in the military of people who side with Joab. So there's a little bit of a challenge that happens there. So David's been careful about that, afraid that he didn't have enough clout as king or power as the king, recognized by the people, that he could punish Joab for those things. But he knows it needs to be done. So he's ended up passing the buck to Solomon to get that taken care of, basically. Verse 6, so therefore, according to thy wisdom, and let not his hoar head go down to the grave in peace, meaning don't let his head of white hair go down, basically. Don't punish him, is what he's telling Solomon. You need to punish this guy. He's done some wrong things. I was derelict in my duty, and now I'm giving it to you, son, to go take care of. Verse 7, but show kindness unto the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be of those that eat at thy table, for so they came to me when I fled because of Absalom thy brother. So remember, in the civil war, Absalom was trying to take over the kingdom, and David fled from this because he was weak. He didn't have the Spirit of God with him. This was a little while after he had Uzziah killed, and Bathsheba, Uzziah's wife, was taken by David, that whole mess. Barzillai was a man who took David in and fed him and took care of him when he fled from Absalom out of the area, basically. Verse 8, and behold, thou hast with thee Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite of Bahurim, which cursed me with a grievous curse in the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at Jordan, and I swear to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put thee to death with the sword. Now therefore hold him not guiltless, for thou art a wise man, and knowest what thou oughtest to do unto him. But his forehead bring thou down to the grave with blood. So he's saying, basically, look, there's this Shimei guy. When I got exiled, when I got kicked out, basically during the Civil War, Barzillai took me in and helped me and fed me, and so he deserves the king's reward. Take care of his family. But Shimei, he basically threw stones at me and yelled at me and kind of cursed me, basically was swearing at me, saying bad things about me. So we have to realize that because David still was the king and he regained his kingdom, Shimei was treasonous in what he did. Basically, while at the moment it looked like Absalom was the leader, Absalom fell and David took over. So Shimei was on the wrong side of the line. And this is not uncommon when we have like political strife and other things, when a political person rises to power and kind of disrupts the status quo of everything that's going on, and people follow him, and then that person falls from power. Those that follow him tend to be seen as on the wrong side of the rules. So it's not an uncommon challenge. Again, we see this way back here, and we're still talking. This is close to about 1000 BC, between 1000 BC and 1047 BC time frame. So this is still happening way back then. That these things are happening. So David is telling Solomon, basically, you need to deal with Shimei. Basically, he's treasonous, and that's where we're at. So in fact, here's a comment here. Barzillai and Shimei both lived at Mahanaim. Shimei, instead of showing kindness to David when he fled from Absalom, threw rocks at him and cursed him. Barzillai, however, showed great kindness to David and those who had fled with him by providing them with food and clothing. David asked Solomon to provide for the family of Barzillai as payment for his kindness. So just looking at why are these instructions that are happening here. It's interesting because there was actually at this time, and we're going to learn this in Chronicles, which is the next set of books over, just a little bit of a heads up, that at this time in history, there was actually a large gathering. There was a feast, there was a procession where they called all the judges, all the leaders of each of the tribes together to officially crown Solomon as king. David kind of hurriedly made Solomon as king when Adonijah was trying to rally political power around himself. In the last chapter, we saw that, but we learn in Chronicles that there was actually a large gathering that finally happened. So this is, in a way, a second coronation of King Solomon, but a way more official one, where each of the tribes of Israel were allowed to come forward and say, yes, we will pledge our allegiance or obedience to King Solomon. So to make it fully official at that time, basically. So while the one that King David did was official, it wasn't seen as fully official. So there's still a little bit of question in there in what was going on. Verse 10, so David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And the days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years. 7 years reigned he in Hebron, 33 years reigned he in Jerusalem. Then sat Solomon upon the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was established greatly. But Solomon is now officially the full king of Israel. Verse 13, and Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And she said, comest thou peaceably? And he said, peaceably. So there's still some uncomfortableness between these two. So she's like, are you here? Are we cool? You're okay? Yeah, we're okay. And he said, moreover, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And she said, say on. So he's like, I got a favor to ask of you. So she's like, okay, what is it? Verse 15, and he said, thou knowest that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their faces on me, and that I should reign. So he still believes he should have been the rightful king. He still believes this idea that he should have been king. Howbeit, the kingdom is turned about, and is become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. So he admits the Lord did say that he would be king, but Adonijah says that he believes he should still be the king, even though the Lord said Solomon should be the king. So he's kind of not fully agreeing with what the Lord said, basically. But he still has this idea that he should be the king. The kingdom was wrongfully taken. I should be the king. Verse 16, and now I ask one petition of thee, deny me not. And she said unto him, say on. And he spake, and he said, speak, I pray thee, unto Solomon the king, for he will not say thee nay, that he give me Abishag the Shunammite to wife. And Bathsheba said, well, I will speak for thee unto the king. Now here's the thing we have to understand about this, okay? Abishag is one of the wives or concubines of King David. So when Solomon becomes king, he kind of takes all the wives of the previous successor as him. Now, Abishag is most likely one of those women that was probably a part of that group that David had to set aside necessarily, like because of Absalom coming in and trying to take over power. David had to set a bunch of his wives and concubines aside. So this is what's happening here, basically, is Adonijah is saying, hey, look, I know I can't go to the king and talk to him. I can't do that because he's not going to listen to me. But you're his mom. Will you go talk to the king and ask him if I can have one of these women as my wife? I would like to have her as wife. So Bathsheba says, yes, I will. Now, here's the thing, is the rule says this is the rule in Israel. Okay, the law says that you cannot sleep with the wives of the king, basically. That is treason. A man sleeping with the wives of a king would be seen as if the king is trying to usurp power, that away from that person is trying to usurp the kingdom, which is what Absalom did. That's why he got in so much trouble for this. And they try to use this as a way to establish himself as, oh, I've slept with these women. They are now my wives. They cannot sleep with the king anymore. Therefore, I should be the king. And so this is kind of what Adonijah is saying is, technically he's not trying to commit treason, but he kind of is. He knows the law and he's trying to get the king to go around the law to help him fulfill, he's got the hots for somebody, and he wants to go around things basically. And it already shows he's willing to go around this idea that the Lord made Solomon the king. Anyway, so he's not quite following all the rules anyways, kind of still doing what he wants. But Bathsheba says, I'll go talk to the king about it. Now, you might have to look at this and say, why would Bathsheba say that? Why would Bathsheba go, dude, you know the rules. No way. There's no way that's going to happen. No, not a chance at all that that's going to happen. You're not going to get that. That's defying the rules. I'm not going to bring that up to my son. No way. That's not good. She didn't tell him that. She said, I will go talk to the king about this. So she might be thinking in her mind, oh, maybe I can use this in another way, basically. So, verse 19, Bathsheba therefore went unto King Solomon to speak unto him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed himself unto her and sat down on his throne and caused a seat to be set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right hand. Then she said, I desire one small petition of thee, I pray thee, and say me not nay. And the king said unto her, ask on, my mother, for I will not say thee nay. So she's trying to convince him to let this happen, basically, by trying to get him to not say no before she's even asked. Verse 21, and she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah thy brother to wife. And King Solomon answered and said unto his mother, and why dost thou ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is mine elder brother, even for him and for Abiathar the priest and for Joab the son of Zeruiah. So he's going, wait a minute here. Why don't you just ask to give the kingdom to Adonijah? And to kind of go along with this group of people who are trying to go against me. Verse 23, then King Solomon sware by the Lord, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah have not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord liveth, which hath established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who hath made me an house, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death this day. And King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him that he died. So Dumelo in his Bible commentary said this, amongst Eastern nations, the wives and concubines of a deceased or dethroned king were taken by a successor. And so Adonijah's request for Abishag was regarded as tantamount to a claim on the throne. So that's exactly what Solomon saw here was, wait a minute here, this is not, Adonijah's still trying to establish himself. And this was one way he'd try to do it. So maybe we can look at this and say Bathsheba had a second motive, which was probably a bad idea on Adonijah's part to go to Bathsheba to say this, because Adonijah went because he knew Bathsheba would get in front of the king to get this done. So he's trying to sneakily get in with this. There's probably a little bit more to the story than we're told, but Bathsheba, instead of saying, no, that can't happen, I'm not going to do that, she goes along with it. And maybe the reason she goes along with it is to basically point out to the king that Adonijah's still trying to become king. He's still trying to work the system to get in. And so Solomon says, we can't have this. That is treason. We're going to take this as a sign of treason. He's still trying to usurp the power. And so we're going to kill him because it is treason. And the punishment of treason is death. So that's what happens. Now, Benaiah does this. He goes out there and he is the executioner. He's the one that has to do this. So now verse 26, and unto Abiathar, so this is King David is now giving his decree of what to do with these people that were going along with Adonijah, because there still was some challenge, some little bit of rumors and ideas where there was backroom deals, almost a secret combination coming together, possibly to try to get Adonijah to be the king over Solomon. So now Solomon's going to have to just quell the whole thing, basically. So verse 26, and unto Abiathar the priest said the king, get thee to Anathoth, unto thine own fields, for thou art worthy of death. So Abiathar is one of the high priests, and he's basically saying, look, you backed the wrong horse. You went after Adonijah, and you followed him instead of what the Lord said, basically. So you've committed treason, which is death. He says, but I will not at this time put thee to death, because thou bearest the ark of the Lord God before David my father, and because thou hast been afflicted in all wherein my father was afflicted. So Abiathar did a lot with King David. He suffered with King David in a lot of ways. And so he says, look, you suffered a lot for my dad. So out of the fact that you helped my dad a lot, the fact that you are a priest of God, I'm going to exile you basically from the kingdom. You're not allowed in the kingdom anymore. So, but that's your punishment instead of death, basically. Verse 27, so Solomon thrust out Abiathar from being priest unto the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spake concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Now, if you remember Eli was the priest who had the two sons that were bad. He didn't take care of them, and so it was prophesied that Eli's family would no longer have the priesthood anymore. That has now been fulfilled. Abiathar was a descendant of Eli, and he has lost his priesthood. Basically, he's been kicked out of being able to be a high priest, and has been exiled from the community, basically. Verse 28, then tidings came to Joab, for Joab had turned after Adonijah, though he turned not after Absalom. So remember, Absalom was the other civil war, the other challenger against David, and Joab stayed with David. Let me make sure I get my terms right here. So he was seen as a detractor from Absalom, but he was loyal to David at the time. But then, on this instance, he went against David and Solomon and going with Adonijah. And Joab fled unto the tabernacle of the Lord and cut hole on the horns of the altar. So he went to the tabernacle and grabbed the horns in the tabernacle of the congregation, basically, the main altar there, if you remember. He grabbed on those horns. So he's doing basically what Adonijah tried to do as well, to seek a judgment from the king and get his voice heard. Verse 29, and it was told King Solomon that Joab was fled unto the tabernacle of the Lord, and behold, he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, go, fall upon him. And Benaiah came to the tabernacle of the Lord and said unto him, thus saith the king, come forth. And he said, nay, I will die here. And Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. So Benaiah went to go get Joab and say, you need to come with me. And Benaiah's like, and Joab's like, no, I'm not going. I'm not going to go. I'm staying here until I die, because I'm in sanctuary, basically. I'm in hiding from the king. And so Benaiah went back to the king, basically, and said, he's not coming out. He's staying in sanctuary. Verse 30. Sorry, I just read that one. Verse 31. Let's see. That's right, verse 31. And the king said unto him, do as he has said, and fall upon him and bury him, that thou mayest take away the innocent blood which Joab shed from me and from the house of my father. So this is going to be the punishment for the two killings that Joab did earlier on that David didn't punish him for. And verse 32, and the Lord shall return his blood upon his own head, who fell upon two men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword. My father David, not knowing thereof, to wit, Abner the son of Ner, captain of the host of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, captain of the host of Judah. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab, and upon the head of his seed forever. But upon David, and upon his seed, and upon his house, and upon his throne, there shall be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and fell upon him and slew him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. So this is David, or Solomon, is now taking care of these people. And you might be wondering, why is Benaiah the one that's going out, in a way, being an executioner for all of these people, things that are going on in here? This is because Benaiah is basically taking Joab's old job. as the leader of the army. And back then, they didn't have a difference between police and army. It was the same thing, basically. So that's kind of how it worked out. Now, verse 26, unto Abiathar. Oh, sorry, I just read that. I think my scriptures moved. Sorry. Okay, verse 35, excuse me. All right, and the king put Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, in his room over the host, and Zadok the priest did the king put in the room of Abiathar. So now he's putting the people that were loyal to him up into their proper positions. Verse 36, the king sent and called for Shimei and said unto him, build thee an house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and go not forth whence any whither. For it shall be that on the day that thou goest out and passest over the brook Kidron, thou shalt know for certain that thou shalt surely die. Thy blood shall be upon thine own head. So what's happening here basically is Shimei, remember, is the one that David talked about as well earlier that needed to be taken care of, and because he was not good basically to David when they had that civil war. So what he's saying is I want you to go put a house in Jerusalem, and basically you're going to be under house arrest. If you leave the house, you will be killed. So he's basically promising him, go build a house here in Jerusalem and live there and basically stay under house arrest. And verse 38, and Shimei said unto the king, the saying is good, as my lord the king has said, so will thy servant do. And Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days. So Shimei is probably like, oh, good, because he could have been executed for treason. But Shimei is being put on house arrest in Jerusalem, basically. That Shimei is from another part of Israel, so he's being brought in to do this. He's probably pretty happy about this. But he made a promise. Okay, I promise to stay under house arrest. There weren't necessarily guards appointed to stand at the door to protect Shimei, but Shimei was under oath, under promise to stay there. And the word was decreed, if he's out, then the word needs to get back to the king. Verse 39, and it came to pass at the end of 3 years that two of the servants of Shimei ran away unto Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. And they told Shimei, saying, behold, thy servants be in Gath. So Shimei lost two of his servants. Why he lost two of his servants, we don't know. But he did lose two of his servants. They fled and went to a place outside of Israel. Verse 40, and Shimei arose and saddled his ass and went to Gath to Achish to seek his servants. And Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath. And it was told Solomon that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and was come again. And the king sent and called for Shimei and said unto him, did I not make thee to swear by the Lord and protestest unto thee, saying, know for a certain on the day that thou goest out and walkest abroad any whither, that thou shalt surely die? And thou saidst unto me, the word that I have heard is good. Why then hast thou not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I have charged thee with? So Solomon brought him in going, dude, I put you under house arrest, and I told you, so long as you stay in your house and don't leave, you can live. But if you leave, you break this promise. If you promised me you'd stay there, you broke your promise and you left. That's what's happening here. Now Shimei, after 3 years of being in house arrest, he may have felt like, well, maybe I'm doing okay, or maybe going after the king would grant me an opportunity to say, hey, look, my servants have fled. I need to go get my servants back. But rather than bring it to the king and let the king decide, he decided to just go do it himself. And so this is the challenge that sometimes we run into in life, is sometimes it feels like there's a conflict of two rules. We have to be careful which rules we follow. There is a hierarchy in organizations, and we need to make sure that we honor that hierarchy in those organizations with rules. And we're going to see this here because verse 44, the king, the king said moreover to Shimei, thou knowest all the wickedness which thine heart is privy to, that thou didst to David my father. Therefore the Lord shall return thy wickedness upon thine own head. So Shimei's going to be executed, basically. Now, again, this might not sound like a big, like why did he get killed for such a small thing? In the Bible commentary, they had this to say. They said, this punishment was also just, as Solomon had put Shimei's life in his own hand by imposing upon him confinement in Jerusalem, and Shimei had promised an oath to obey the king's command. The breach of his oath was a crime for which he had no excuse. There is no force at all in the excuses which some commentators adduce in his favor, founded upon the money which his slaves had cost him, and the wish to recover possession of them, which was a right one in itself. If Shimei had wished to remain faithful to his oath, he might have informed the king of the flight of his slaves, have entreated the king that they might be brought back, and have awaited the king's decision. But he had no right thus lightly to break the promise given on oath. By the breach of his oath, he had forfeited his life, and this is the first thing with which Solomon charges him, without his being able to offer any excuse, and it is not till afterwards that he adduces as a second fact in confirmation of the justice of his procedure, the wickedness that he practiced towards his father. So this is the challenge that Shimei has. So Shimei was in house arrest. He promised, he totally agreed with the king, I'll do house arrest. Yes, he railed against David. So Shimei is one of those people who kind of has his own opinion, and he gets kind of roiled up in the moment, maybe, in what's going on, and he believed more Absalom, and so again, Shimei probably should be put to death, but David said, or that Solomon said, look, as long as you stay in house arrest, you live. If you break it, you die. Plain and simple. Shimei had full control over his life, basically. So the problem is, of course, Shimei has servants to help him. His servants flee. For what reason, again, we don't know. But the challenge is now Shimei's lost servants. That means he's got to figure something out with this. It's going to cost him money. He probably paid for those servants, so they fled, so he's not being compensated for the loss of his servants. So it's a detriment to his family and his wealth and his opportunities. So it's right for a person with servants to go find his servants and bring them back. So that is perfectly justified to do. No problems with that. However, we have this other rule that Shimei can't leave his house. So in some way, for some reason, Shimei decided that his right as a slave owner or as a household leader, that right superseded what he said with the king as for his house arrest. And maybe the king would see it as okay for him to go do what he needed to do. Maybe he believed that the rights of property that an owner had would supersede the house arrest, and so that he would be given a pass and be okay. We're not quite sure, but there's some possibilities with that. So this is the challenge that he runs into, is the king finds out. So now Shimei has to be brought to the king. The king says, you broke the rule. You broke the rule. So you're going to be put to death. And not because of this rule, but realize that you also were pretty bad to my dad. You didn't help him out much. So that's going to kind of come back on you now as well. So Shimei was put to death, basically. Now, verse 45, and King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, which went out and fell upon him that he died, and the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So most of the people that were following Adonijah are dead. Adonijah's dead. They've kind of cleaned that up. So that's going to help prevent the kingdom from running into some problems against Solomon. So that helps establish him more to get rid of that. So pretty crazy stuff that's happening at this time. And let's jump to chapter 3 to learn more.